Hello there, people of the internet. Let's go ahead and talk about some logistical issues that militaries have seen before in the past, and just like the history behind some of these logistical issues. I was not necessarily having a conversation about this particular topic, but this kind of popped up whenever I was talking to somebody, and they were talking about how, 223, 556 is great for some applications, but in other applications, 762 by 39 would be the way to go. Because if you were, in range inside of your household and whatnot, and, you're not going to be shooting anywhere near, past 50 yards or so, having the more powerful 30 caliber 762 by 39 would be a better option to immediately stop a threat than, say, a 223 556. Or if you're in an area like I'm in, and somebody might start causing you trouble out at 600 yards away across an open field, maybe something like 556 would be ideal as opposed to something like 762 by 39. We were just talking about the pros and cons to some of that stuff, and I can't remember how the conversation got to it, but it came to the point to where, if the militaries were deciding to use this cartridge for these applications or that cartridge for that application, then that would make a lot more sense because they would be using the right cartridge for the right applications. And eventually, I can't quite remember how the conversation actually went, but it stemmed down to me saying that's not so easy from a logistical standpoint. If a military has a standard issue rifle that is given out to a vast majority of its soldiers with one particular kind of cartridge, then to give soldiers another kind of cartridge, just from a logistical standpoint, it's just an absolute mess. If you have, soldiers, if you have standard infantry with a 556, and let's say you have them over in this area in the desert with 556, but you have these guys in this urban environment with 762 by 39, you have to make sure that these guys get 556 and these guys get 762 by 39. You got to make sure that you have plants creating and processing the ammunition to be able to get your supply and get your supply units to be able to resupply the soldiers that are on the ground. And it's just the idea of mistakenly mixing up your ammunition is just so significant from a logistical standpoint. Think about think about the mailing system here in the United States and how often they mess that stuff up. Now imagine going across war zones and battlefields and whatnot, trying to get certain supplies to certain people, and it would just be an absolute logistical nightmare if you had two kinds of intermediate cartridges for your infantry soldiers. And we've seen this type of system before. Like, for example, during the Second World War, we saw the Japanese with the 6.5 Arisaka and the 7.7 Arisaka, and the logistical issues that came from that were an absolute mess, to the point to where the Japanese just decided to kind of give up on the 7.7 Arisaka and convert back to the 6.5. The Italians did the same thing with the 6.5 Carcano and the 7.35 Carcano from 1938 to 1940, I think it was. The Italian forces tried transitioning all of their soldiers from 6.5 to a 7.35 cartridge with these new rifles and whatnot. But these new rifles, of course, the transition is not going to be immediate, especially if you have yourself any real sizable army. But these new rifles were so similar in nature to these old school 6.5 Carcanos that you literally could not tell them apart. There were engravings on the stock, and there was like a handguard on the stock to kind of differentiate. But there were just so many ways that you could mix up 7.35 and 6.5 from a logistical standpoint. The ammunition looked remarkably similar. It was just not a good idea, and we would still see logistical issues to this day. Of course, there are exceptions. If you have a small squad equipping this small squad, this individual unit, with a particular firearm and particular ammunition, that's not really that big of a deal. But if you have standard infantry on this side of the world and standard infantry over here and standard infantry over here, and you're like, these guys need this with this ammo, these guys need this with this ammo, these guys need this with this ammo, it's just a complete logistical nightmare to try and equip all of these different soldiers with all of these different kinds of ammunition. So you find one good universal ammo that does basically as much as possible like a good universal go-to round. It can handle full automatic because there's not a whole lot of recoil. It's long range enough to take care of most applications. It's powerful enough to be able to take care of most threats. It's just a good universal do everything cartridge, so you only have to supply one type of rifle and one type of ammunition to all of your soldiers, no matter where it is that they are at. Now, there will be specialty units and specialty specialty roles and whatnot that do play a part inside of the armed forces. Like, you're not going to give an AR-556, M4 to somebody who has a designated sniper role or something like that. You're going to give them a more powerful rifle, probably chambered in 7.62 NATO or some other kind of caliber. I'm not sure how the military runs those particular things. But from a logistical standpoint, giving everybody the same cartridge and the same type of rifle, that is definitely the preference on the best way to go. Even if the cartridge that is given, although it was better upon adoption, although it is no longer great in comparison to some other things out there, just because everybody has it, a lot of countries will decide not to update and improve their rifles and cartridge technology in favor of just keeping the previously owned equipment, especially if we're talking about a time period where there's a lot of conflict and whatnot. Like, for example, during the Second World War in 1938, right before the World War, the Italians, whenever they tried transitioning over to this 7.35 Carcano round, if World War II had been delayed by half a decade or so, they probably would have been able to pull that off. However, logistically speaking, trying to give all of your soldiers new rifles and new ammo that looks very similar to your old rifles and old ammo, it's just not going to be something that works out very easily. The Japanese had the same issue. You have these new rifles with this new ammo, and you're trying to replace the old rifles with the old ammo, and of course that did not work out very well for them. The Germans sort of had a situation like this. It was less logistics, more of a issue with resources, where they had the Sturmgewehr and they tried giving it to all of their infantry soldiers and replacing the bolt-action Kar 98. Of course, that did not work out. Like I said, less about the logistics behind replacing a gun, more about the lack of manpower and resources and ammunition that Germany had during that time period. So it's not really, it's simply not that simple of, hey, guess what, I have this rifle with this ammo, and I am a part of this army, but we're going to do this job, so let's put in a requisition for this non-standardized rifle with this non-standardized ammunition for my, 5 platoons that are going to be going over there, and it's just not something that is feasibly, logistically viable, especially not in terms of anything that would be long-term. If you have people that are holding an area and they have this gun and this cartridge, but your main military force has this gun with this cartridge, keeping that one force supplied would be significantly more difficult if they have an oddball rifle and cartridge than it would be keeping your main military force, where your factories are already set up and your supply lines are already set up to be able to ship this ammunition with this rifle to these forces in these areas. Trying to swap all that up is just an absolute nightmare. I have a couple of 7.62 by 39 rounds inside of this rifle. It just rained, and these rifles are a little on the wet side, so I'm going to go ahead and blow some of the water out of this AK here. I had one guy yell at me for getting my rifles wet in the rain one time, and as far as I'm concerned, if your rifles can't get wet, you need better rifles. So let's send a round downrange here. This magazine kind of sucks, so any malfunctions from this rifle is from the magazine and not from the rifle itself. I'm just going to launch some lead. I guess I'll aim for the rim of the car, the front rim. Okay, well, we got ourselves a couple of rounds downrange, and the AK, of course, worked just fine because, of course, it is an AK. Magazine, like I said, is a little sketchy. It's just this cut-down 10-round magazine that I got from a garage sale, I think. Whenever an army changes calibers, and they change the ammunition that they're giving out to everybody, oftentimes they try to go with the same kind of ammunition for basically everyone. Now, there are some issues with that. What is this? There are some issues with that in terms of, Like, there's a reason why NATO uses both 7.62 NATO and 5.56 NATO. There's some applications where you just need a more powerful, more potent cartridge that has a larger bullet diameter, so you could maybe fit more compound or a larger penetrator or something like that inside of that projectile. Or if you have a bunch of people that are foot soldiers and they're, I don't know, walking around in the jungles or something, or maybe they're in the deserts or wherever it is. If you have foot soldiers walking long distances, maybe giving them heavy 7.62 NATO rifles would not be ideal, so 5.56 NATO would probably be the best way to go. For most applications, those two cartridges would be able to handle basically everything. So although there are some applications where 7.62 by 39 would be ideal, it just doesn't make sense from a logistical standpoint to try and work a third option in, unless you're talking about small squads in specific situations. So hopefully you guys learned something about logistics and logistical issues. It's not as easy as some people say. Well, I say some people. It's not as easy as I've heard these some people say. I don't really have specific ideas for who said it, besides this one situation where I was having this one conversation with this one guy, and there's just kind of what popped up. Now, if you are in a situation where you have, I don't know, some people that are undercover behind enemy lines, and you, let's say, hypothetically, the enemy has AKs, so you give your guys AKs so they can acquisition more ammunition, or so the enemy doesn't hear a M4 or M16 firing, and they're like, hey, that's an enemy weapon, I recognize that sound, we got to get our ass over there. Maybe they recognize the AK more. Insert your choice of a situation here where that would be a good idea. But although that would be a good idea on a small term scale, and it would be possible on a small term scale, you just can't do that with any real significant amounts. It's never worked in history. Whenever you have countries trying to equip just a massive variety of their soldiers with different kinds of cartridges for different kinds of situations, especially if we factor in, well, there's a reason why old school countries before the development of intermediate cartridges gave their foot soldiers full power rifle cartridges that were way too powerful, because these full power rifle cartridges, they only had to give one kind of rifle cartridge out to everybody, and from a logistical standpoint, that would be absolutely ideal. You got your one rifle cartridge and your one pistol cartridge, and that was what you had. Well, the idea of having a full power rifle cartridge, such as 7.62 NATO, and more than one intermediate cartridge, it just creates too many hurdles, creates too many hassles. So even though countries way back in the day were using full power rifle cartridges, like this is an 8mm Mauser rifle, and it is dirty and wet. Hey, let's go ahead and send a couple of rounds of this downrange, why not? But what was I just saying? You know what, just for fun, this is some Turkish ammo that I had out here in the rain. Let's see if this stuff fires. But they were giving these infantry soldiers full power rifle ammo because that's what they were giving everybody. Machine gunners, anti-vehicle emplacements, like everybody got this ammo. So although full power rifle ammo for the time period was not ideal, that's just what they got because logistically speaking, that was what was important. So I have no idea if this stuff is going to fire. Let's go ahead and set a couple of rounds downrange, see if it actually goes bang. Hey, that went bang, look at that. Yeah, I got no reason why this wouldn't fire. Alright, fantastic. Yeah, that stuff was sealed. Let me know what you guys think down below about these logistical issues. I'm sure that you guys can give more examples to the people that are in the comments down below. So, hey, if you want to read through the comments, I'm sure that you're going to find lots of really interesting stories. So that being said, thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I will see you guys on the next episode. Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. The poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.